The author and researcher Andrew Collins discusses the importance of the Swan Constellation in many of his books. In his publications, he also proves that the Swan Constellation was perceived by the most ancient cultures as a heavenly portal through which souls traveled to the afterlife. Many deities were associated with swans as well. For example, the Indian goddess Lakshmi and the Greek Aphrodite were often depicted on the back of a flying swan. The daughters of the Norse god Odin, the Valkyries, were called swan maidens, and the Irish goddess Bridget was often depicted with a swan. Like the Greek god Zeus, the Irish god Angus was also known to transform into a swan. The motive of transformation into a swan also occurs in the Irish Children of Lir legend. Could there be a connection between King Lear and Lyra, the constellation right next to the swan? The brightest star in the Swan Constellation, Deneb, was a pole star around 15,000 BC and should again be the closest star to the North Pole in the future. But there are more connections between the Earth and the Swan Constellation. Kepler 186f made history as the first planet deemed comparable to Earth by NASA. Situated within the Swan Constellation, this planet lies approximately 580 light-years away from Earth. Estimates suggest its landscape resembles a steppe, with shallow waters and a gravitational force about 17% higher than on Earth. There is a peculiar phenomenon currently occurring in the Swan Constellation. It's happening around the star KIC 8462852, more commonly known as the Tabby star, named after Tabitha Boyajian, the lead author of a scientific study on the star's unusual behavior. The study was whimsically called WTF Star and more officially Where's the Flux? Boyajian's team couldn't hide their astonishment at the unusual behavior of the light curve of this star and concluded that it is either the result of a natural phenomenon or alien technology, neither of which they can explain. Scientists are still discussing what is happening around the Tabby star, and previously proposed solutions are being debated once again. Whatever is near that star causes its periodic dimming from our view. Andrew Collins and his colleague Rodney Hale discovered that Earth's solar cycle synchronizes with the Tabby star, and each of these synchronizations is a multiple of number 11. I recommend reading their study for further research. There are also numerical and runic connections between the Earth and the Swan Constellation. For example, the recurring synchronicity of the number 11, a number important in relation to the mysterious Tabby star. People started noticing these numbers frequently, as they were often appearing on watches or elsewhere. This phenomenon continues to this day, and you may have noticed it as well, especially during moments of contemplation or when discussing something significant. With over 20 years of experience working with runes, sacred geometry, and magical symbols, I'm used to reading symbolic language and have begun to realize how certain runes and symbols are associated with the number 11. The most obvious is the rune Lagus, which looks like a number 1 turned to the right, although the Etruscans depicted this rune turned to the left, so it was literally this sign, number 1. In my experience, the left side is associated with the current matrix and the right side with the prime reality, or the afterlife. Lagus is a rune of water, so it is also connected to water birds. The waters of the earth are reflected in the celestial waters, and it is not by chance that we use expressions like spacecraft or spaceship. The Lagus rune is also hidden and duplicated in the following runes: Tivas, Ansus, Ehvas, Eihvas, and Manas. Tivas is the rune of the pillar of the world, connecting heaven and earth. Ansus is the rune of our spiritual and divine ancestors, but it's also a symbol of our divinity. Ehvas stands for the sacred 8-legged horse of the god Odin, which is probably a hidden allegory of the light body, sometimes called the Merkaba. The core of the Merkaba, the double tetrahedron, has 8 points. Ehvas similar name to Ehvas, represents the world tree, or the unity of all the parallel worlds. And finally, Mana symbolizes the human being. Together we could read the meaning of such a runic connection as this. Through the pillar connecting heaven and earth, the light bodies of our ancestors and our divine selves travel through the cosmic and other parallel realms. The name for the Norse world tree is Yggdrasil, which translates as I travel or my chariot. Could it all be a coincidence? The rune that resembles the Swan Constellation the most is definitely Algis. This name comes from the extinct Old Germanic language of the Gothic tribes, where the term Algis meant swan. Algis rune symbolizes our divine origin and our connection with the celestial spheres and otherworldly realities. In runic yoga, the Alki stance resembles the invocation of the heavens. When it comes to the 11-11 synchronicity, this evokes, among other things, 4 lines and 2 central points. If we cross these lines, we get an 8-pointed star resembling a snowflake, which in Norse magic symbolizes the connection of the 9 realms of the world tree. The 8 outer points unite in the 9th and sacred point that represents the source. We can guess how the Swan Constellation relates to the history of our planet, or start searching in the memories of our souls for answers. I will try to describe my memories, which relate to the Swan Constellation, the Elven race, and the ancient settlers of this planet and its inner core. The connection between swans and elves is apparent even in the words themselves. The original name for an elf, Alfur, is directly derived from the Icelandic word alft, meaning swan. In Middle Irish, the swan is Ella, in Old Celtic Eli, so the word elf is related to the swan as well. In languages, we often discover profound insights and truths, in contrast to history books, where facts are sometimes intentionally distorted. Ancient Irish and Norse tribes maintained a mysterious connection with the Swan Constellation. I have found myself recollecting my elven origins from a very young age. However, it wasn't until we moved to our current home near a town called Silver Rock that this journey truly began to unfold. Here I discovered portals to elven realms, as well as an ancient broken teleportation station that used to be directly connected to the Swan Constellation. Around the same time, I started getting to know a certain elven man from the Swan Constellation. At first I called him Nameless because he didn't want to reveal his name for my safety and his own, but for better orientation I started to call him Noah. Noah is a fighter for human rights. I describe this in my novel Brides of the Gods. I started to connect with Noah's higher self from the prime reality, which coexists outside of time and space. I can call upon this version of him at any time. His current incarnation in a subtle, elven body is very busy. I contact him only in times of need and prefer to wait for him to contact me. We are telepathically connected, like all the elven incarnates are, whether from the Swan Constellation or inner Earth. The people from the Swan Constellation are similar to humans, but they belong to an elven race and are either much taller or much smaller than us. In the subtle universe, meaning universe of a finer density, the elven kin once found refuge on the surface of planet Earth and later inside it. All of them share the characteristics of very pale skin, wrinkled faces, sinewy bodies, and either pointed or larger ears, along with sunken, slightly slanted eyes. They originate from the subtle universe. Their bodies possess a finer density to ours, with organs appearing like gems or crystals. They are more luminous than we are and incarnate and die consciously. They practice art, magic, and alchemy, and brought runes and other magical symbols to planet Earth. As I have mentioned previously, they are the Icelandic Alvar, Elves, and the words Alf and Elf are derived from the words for swans. Since these elves were white or black-haired, ethereal, and possessed the ability to levitate and even fly, they could easily be likened to swans. It remains a mystery why this constellation was named after these graceful water birds, which have always symbolically bridged the element of air with that of water. In numerous ancient cultures, the constellations along the Milky Way's dark rift were regarded as portals between the material and divine worlds, and swans themselves were respected as powerful psychopomps, meaning guides between parallel worlds. Much more can be found in my new book, Parallel Worlds, with the subtitle Elven Realms, Inner Earth, and Afterlife Homes.